I'm not sure that I would agree with the statement that an addiction is necessarily a disease. Calling it a disease, I take issue with, because when someone's addicted to something, usually it starts off with choice. People who become alcoholics or drug addicts or overeaters, there's usually something else behind it. But I wouldn't call it a disease, because people with cancer don't choose to get cancer. So I just think you've got to be careful in how you classify this sort of behavior as a disease. If you take bulimia or anorexia, they are disorders. They're not referred to as diseases. Not that I'm a doctor, but these people who develop these unhealthy eating habits, and they get very, very big or very, very small, and they say I've got a disease. Not quite.
A lot of the overeating stuff comes from comfort.
If you want to call it a faulty coping mechanism, fair enough. Is it a disease? If it's a coping mechanism, or any addiction is symptomatic, or it's got an element of a coping mechanism in it, then call it a coping mechanism, or call it a behavioral problem, a disorder, or maybe even some sort of imbalance from a cognitive standpoint. I just think it's dangerous to call it a disease, because when people say I've got a disease, you take the responsibility out of that person's control. At the end of the day, even though you might have a moment of weakness, you still have the ability to say, I choose to do this. And when you can choose to do something, it's not a disease, because people don't choose to get diseases. No one does that. I think I'll develop cancer today. I think I might go out and catch HIV. No one does that. Therefore, it can't be a disease in that sense. You know what I mean? Oprah and the Americans are worse for that. They call everything a disease. I've got sex addiction. I've got a disease. No, you don't. There's something wrong there, definitely. Probably psychologically, there's something not quite right that you need to have existence with. But don't call it a disease, is all I'm saying. Dis-ease, perhaps, but not a disease.
Well, with drugs and alcohol, I know a lot of people who take drugs, drink a lot. You know,
who do you hang around with?
I know that they are not addicts, and I know this because they're not doing it because they have to. They're doing it because it's a social thing, and they get high or whatever, and it's a good feeling for them. But they're not then going,
let's do it again. So it's recreational.
Yeah. It's the same with the alcohol.
If people are taking drugs or going for a drink, okay, it's a recreational social thing until it's not. It's never the case that the first time you do drugs, you do it at home by yourself with no one else around. You do it socially. It feels good and whatever, and then you do it again with the same people or with other people. You do that a couple more times. You start to lose control and not necessarily realize that you're losing control. And before you know it, you do it because it feels good, but it's what you've always done. And then you're doing it to feel normal because you're now addicted. It's a slippery slope. This is sort of why I would never say that being addicted to whatever it is a disease. Not really. It's something that you don't think you'll lose control over until you do. I used to know a guy who he did drugs. He thought he was in control. I don't think he was in control because he was always high all the time. It was always he was always high or just coming down and just hanging because of it. And it's like, how can you be in control if you're trying every single substance under the sun?
I suppose one of the reasons that people say it's a disease because you can cure the disease and you can cure addiction. Cigarettes and things like that, it's all to do with...
But again, even if you take cigarettes, the nicotine
you're going
and all
into
the rest
the shop
of it, it's a choice. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So in one instance, it could be you over drinking or overeating or taking a cigarette or taking recreational drugs and all the rest of it. Even if you take sex addiction, having sex is a natural thing. If it becomes an addiction and it gets to a point where it's affecting your well-being physically or mentally, that one's a little bit, I don't know, that's obviously a disorder, but there's something wrong there. I'm simply saying, if you're choosing to do something to your detriment, how can you call it a disease? It's choice first, isn't it? It's no longer choice after you're addicted, but by that point you've already repeated the action how many times to make yourself addicted? And by that point it's hard to break free.
Would it be down to education, lack of education?
Lack of education, my ass, come on. Sometimes maybe, but I just think there are too many people who are ensnared by alcoholism and these addictions that are legal for the most part. It can't really be a lack of education, just people do what they do and they don't care. It's not as simple as that, but I wouldn't call that a disease. On the cigarettes they have smoking kills you, smoking reduces your life expectancy. We already know what alcohol abuse does to the body and all the rest of it. You know, so how can you tell me it's a lack of education? People don't really care.
So the NHS, they get swamped with people Friday, Saturday night. Now, what they were saying is, oh, we could start charging people who were coming in with injuries sustained whilst under the influence of alcohol and or drugs. They're mostly talking about alcohol. Now, what do you think to that sort of thing? Because that is, again, people, are they addicted? I suppose if you're getting repeat offenders...
I don't think it's addiction. I think it's irresponsible behaviour. Charging people, if someone needs their stomach pumped, that's not going to work. So do you let people get absolutely shit-faced and keep... which is what they do now? That doesn't work either. What does work? What if you were to go into a hospital and you needed your stomach pumped and they refused to do it because of your irresponsible behaviour? Would that stop people? People get shit-faced and out of their minds because they know if something happens, there's a safety net there. Let's say that didn't exist. Let's say we had something in place where people refused outright to supply treatment to people who were drinking and under the influence and near death. If they did that, people would have to moderate their drinking if they wanted to stay alive. That's natural law taking over there. Extreme, but it would work better than what we have now. I think the problem is have a system where people want to be taken care of yet demand the right to have a say in how things work. If people want to have a say, they need to prove that their opinions and their sayings are worth something, add value. Therefore, they need to be responsible adults. And if there's not that, and you've just got people who want to drink themselves into oblivion or want to engage in negative sort of behaviour that isn't progressive, then they need to be looked after. But you can't have a society with both types of people. And at the minute we're living in a situation where people want both. I want the government to take care of me, but I want a say in exactly how things run.
I have to say one thing that can be said for the addiction is not a disease, is people's reaction to people who are classed as addicts.
Oh.
So you can say whatever disease I have, cancer or whatever. People go, oh, I'm very sorry for that.
Yeah.
You say, oh, I'm addicted to heroin. Oh, yeah. Right, great. Chosen to do that.
Well, yeah. Usually it starts off with a choice. It might not be a choice now that you're addicted, or so much of a choice, or it might not be so much of a rational choice. But if you made unless someone else stuck that needle in your arm without your consent and without your will, every single time, no one really cares.
It can be difficult, but you have that free choice to stop.
Usually before it goes too far, but because it feels good in the moment and everyone else is doing it, the alarm bells don't ring until, if they ring at all, far too late.
Yeah.